I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Boulder Valley School District Board of Education for Tuesday, February 25th. Sandy, will you please call the roll?
Albright.
Here.
Belville. Here. Benford. Here. Fuqua. Here. Marquis. Here. Myers.
Here.
Reed.
Here.
Thank you. Will you please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I'd like to remind everyone who has joined this group tonight of the vision of the Boulder Valley School District. We develop our children's greatest abilities and make possible the discovery and pursuit of their dreams, which when fulfilled will benefit us all. We provide a comprehensive and innovative approach to education and graduate successful, curious, lifelong learners who confidently confront the great challenges of their time. Today, we will start our meeting with the superintendent's report. Dr. Messenger.
President Albright, members of the board, good evening and welcome. I have a few items I'd like to mention, and of course I'd welcome questions after my comments. The first item is on the consent agenda this evening. You are considering the acceptance of a donation from Whole Food Stores, which would provide us the resources to purchase a food truck. There was an article in the Daily Camera this morning about that. I just wanted to comment a brief bit about that. Part of our motivation and interest in doing this, as has been noted, is to increase our participation in our high school students in the hot lunch program, because many of our students leave campus to acquire their food and or don't have an adequate lunch. So we think this will help with participation, and also we'd like to think also with healthier food options, which will be a part of what we provide. This also will allow us to take food to other locations. So we have summer school where we serve a lot of food to our students, and also cater to groups, our own employees, as we do work in the district. So we appreciate the generosity of the Whole Food Store, and this is an exciting adventure that we're on. And as you know, we struggle each year maintaining our enterprise around food service so that we can have it be a break-even endeavor, and so we hope that this will generate some additional revenue. That's our plan. And I just want to thank Ann Cooper and Leslie Stafford for their leadership with this, and again, the support of Whole Foods. So, shifting gears, and I'll get a little quick update on a couple of legislative issues. As you know, we've all been working together with others on school funding, and so it's our understanding that House Bill 1292, carried by Senator Johnston and Representative Hamner, will be introduced. If it hasn't today, it will be tomorrow, is our understanding, and it will be those legislators' effort to secure additional funding in addition to what the governor has proposed for schools for next year. The governor has proposed a cost of living adjustment, 2.6%, and also growth as a part of what he presented, or his staff did, to the Joint Budget Committee in November. So this would be in addition to that. So part of the conversation that we've been having with the legislators that are carrying this bill is how the money would be packaged, and whether it would be reoccurring dollars or whether it would be one time. So the latest information we received this afternoon would be that this initial draft, unless it changes from the time we last saw it, when it's introduced to committee, maybe as soon as next Monday in the House Education Committee, would have $100 million to help restore what's referred to as the negative factor. The negative factor, as we know it, is over $1 billion, so this would be a start to restore that of $100 million. Also, that would be reoccurring, and there would also be $20 million directed towards early literacy, and also an additional $35 million towards English language learner funding. And so those three in combination are $155 million that would be recurring. Now, obviously, every legislature every year has to approve a budget, so I guess every budget is 1 year at a time, but with the intent of it being reoccurring. And then there is money they've identified that would be of a one-time nature, $40 million for what they call the implementation fund. And really, our understanding in visiting with Senator Johnston and Representative Hamner on this is that it would be money that would be available to school districts for the 14-15 year And that $40 million would be distributed on a per-student basis, so over the 800 and some thousand students across the district. So generally, we look at our share of that as a district's about 3.5%. So if, just in any of these numbers, you can kind of do that mental math to see what that would generate, although we have not seen spreadsheets on this. That's just a rough estimate. So that money would be used to help us work on some of the initiatives around educator effectiveness, our work around assessment, and some of the reform areas that you're familiar with in early literacy. Those are identified in the bill draft as well. And also an additional one-time allocation of $15 million would be used for financial transparency and average daily membership. So an effort to create greater transparency around school funding, and then also counting students for membership, which would drive our funding in the future. This is a phased-in approach because the $15 million primarily would be used for the Colorado Department of Education to set the system up so that they could count students 4 times a year to drive the funding. We have had much comment on this, and we will have more comment on the average daily membership. And then there is $53 million additionally for capital construction infrastructure to support schools, and also $13 million of that would go to charter schools to help them with capital construction. So this is a slightly different version that we saw at the end of last week. So this version has a little more money in the negative factor. Last week's version had $80 million versus $100 million, but last week's version had $100 million in the one-time implementation fund, and this is down to $40 million. So I would just tell you, I think most of the organizations, including the Colorado Association of School Executives and the superintendent's group that's been working together, likely will oppose this bill as presented and will work to amend the bill over time, because I think we would like to see greater resources put into recurring funds, and also have it be in the negative, more of it in the negative factor, because we've encouraged the negative factor restoration and also risk factors. Those would be the kind of 2 categories of funding, but all of that we would like to have less direction on how those dollars should be used and more autonomy for school districts to address their needs. So that's one bill that we'll have, I'm sure, much more conversation about, but I just wanted you to know that you probably will see some media on that in the next day or so. Again, tentatively, the hearing for that is scheduled for next Monday, the 3rd of March. Part of what Senator Johnson's chief of staff shared with us last Friday in a meeting is that the kind of shared interest of Representative Hamner and Senator Johnston and others, Representative Murray out of Castle Rock, is to get this bill introduced, to sort of to identify funds that are needed for schools, recognizing it may well be amended through the course of the session. I don't think anything will happen on commitment of funds to this request or others until the March economic forecast, is our understanding, to see the condition of our state. So that's just a quick update on where we are with school funding. The other bill that I just wanted to mention, and we're going to have a work session later this evening on student assessment. A week ago, yesterday, on President's Day, there was a multi-hour, 4-hour hearing on a bill that was introduced, which was amended at the end of the hearing around student assessment. This initially was a bill that would ask the state to give school districts permission to request a variance from the state required funding, and there was not enough support to get that bill through committee, and so prior to the hearing there was work to prepare an amendment, which I think my understanding is that hearing on this amended bill is tomorrow afternoon. So there was a pretty strong pushback of altering the state expectations around assessment in this legislation, but they seem to be receptive to allowing a task force or study committee to be formed that would be independent of the Colorado Department of Education, but certainly input from the Colorado Department of Education to really answer some questions around the value of the state assessments going forward, the burden that places on students and schools, the rights of parents to opt out of participating in the assessment. So if you have a chance to look at that bill and its amendment, if this is an area of interest, and I know it is for members of the board, I think that this study I think staff-wise, we believe really makes sense because I think there are a lot of maybe unanswered questions around the new assessments that will be coming into place over the next year. And this might better inform future legislators as they make decisions around, and maybe the Board of Education as well, and the Colorado Department of Education. So I just wanted to footnote that. That's a bill we've been tracking and several others, but I'll stop there because otherwise it would be a much longer report. So thank you for your attention. I'd be glad to answer any questions.
There must be questions. Shelley?
Is the $40 million implementation money, is that designated for the mandates that we've had come down on us, or we can use those towards it if we want, or how's that allocated?
So our understanding, Shelley, at this point is that they've identified the areas of which it should be used, and then our responsibility will be, for our share of it, is to report through, we think, through the Unified Improvement Planning process, how we've utilized those resources. And again, it's just, at this time, one-time dollars. So if we were to, purchase a software system that would help us implement educator effectiveness, which we've talked a little bit about, the initial cost, we think is between $50,000 and $100,000. So a portion of our one-time money, as an example, could be used for that, and then we would describe that that's how we use that. Or if we did professional development for educator effectiveness in the summer of 15 or something, then I think we would be asked to at least describe how the monies were used. Our concern about this, of course, is that it's one-time money, and those two examples I just gave you aren't one-time expenditures. There's ongoing costs. So, but that's our understanding, is that we'll need to describe in some way how we used our share of that resource towards, I don't think we have to touch every reform initiative, but, it probably would touch several, and we would report that to the Colorado Department of Education. That's our understanding initially.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Well, I had a follow-up question on that implementation fund as well. Has that become then a competitive grant that districts are competing against each other, or would we receive our almost 3.5%?
So what I'm looking at, this kind of summary sheet that was pushed out this afternoon, which is consistent with what I had seen before. It just says it will be allocated on a per pupil basis. So our understanding is they just take whatever amount eventually winds up in here, and then they'll divide it by the number of full-time equivalent students in the state, and then we'll receive our portion of that on a, so it won't be weighted, it won't be, it'll just be on a per student basis one time.
Sam?
I got one. Do we know if the amount of money coming to implement the potential new way of counting students will be sufficient for us to do that? The switch to average daily membership, should that become law?
We think it will not be adequate. So our understanding is that much of this, they've actually talked about it being $5 million for the transparency and $10 million for the ADM. So I think what we don't have a good sense of is that the sponsors of this legislation fully understand the impact this will have on school districts. We feel they probably have a better understanding of the centralized work associated with this. I mean, I don't know if it's a great detail, but I think they have a sense. They've worked with CDE on this in at least conversation. This was part of Senate Bill 213, you might recall, last year. So, but I think that what isn't accounted for here in a meaningful way is the burden it will place on school districts to conduct the audit and do the reporting. We spend significant time with one count date a year in a less sophisticated system. Now, in time, that might be made simpler, and it might be able to, they can extract and pull data. I mean, that's what they are talking about. So, maybe what we know today won't be what it looks like in the future. But what we know today, part of what's different about this is in Senate Bill 213 a year ago, when there was an ADM dimension, average daily membership, they were going to account every high school student full-time regardless. They were all going to be full-time. So 2,500 of them, high school seniors, they were all full-time, or each level. And every kindergarten student was full-time. So just the number and then you're in. This does not have that provision in it. So we'll need to demonstrate, like we do now with our audits, every student's registration, and to make sure that they are taking enough coursework and documenting their attendance to count as full-time or part-time. That's really burdensome. it just takes a lot of staff time here to compile the data from the schools centrally, and then for us to submit it, and then when it's audited, it takes many hours to go through that, both our staff's time as well as the Colorado Department of Education. So we've been assured they're working to streamline that, but that's a little worry we have, is that the cost associated with this for local, we probably wouldn't be in a position to add staff, so it just shifts workloads is what it does. So that's a worry of ours.
Jenny?
So I have a comment about that, Sam, which is that I've had some conversations, because there's also a bill before the legislature to add $5 million in funding for talented and gifted education, which has a number of strings attached. So I've had conversations with people like that, and one of the things that occurs to me is that I just find it really offensive that this bill has 3 times more money for bookkeeping than it does to meet the needs of our talented and gifted students, which we know is like a crying need in this state. So just not anything I expect you to answer or you to agree with, but it just makes me crazy. So I'm just commenting on that. I do have a question, however, so which is, what percentage of students in this state attend charter schools?
We gotta look around.
Yeah, less than 10 is what was my mind. So Jonathan Dings said 8%, and I think that's consistent with my understanding, at least the ballpark, around 8% of all students.
I'm just sort of interested, because I know I know there's other money other places in some of the proposed legislation for charters. It seems to me like we're increasing charter funding, or funding that's specifically going to charters, by a factor of 2 or 3 times. I think maybe they get 5 to 7 million a year now, and this 13 million is on top of some money that's someplace else that I can't remember and I just don't get it. I don't know why you wouldn't put that money into the BEST program, which has given a good deal of money
Yep.
to charters, or why, and a number of school districts fund charters in the same way that,
Right.
that they fund their other schools. We've traditionally shared bond money with our charters. So I just don't really get this piece of the package. It seems like a lot, when we're all scrambling for dollars, this seems like a lot of money for a fairly small group of kids, proportionately.
So some of what is, that goes on in this discussion is that some charters in our state are authorized through the Charter School Institute, CSI, and others are authorized through district authority. All of our charters in Bvsd are through district authorization. The board has authorized those. So you wind up with a mixed bag here, because our charters have participated in our mill levy overrides and also our bonds, and have supported them and have benefited from them. So that's kind of a win-win. But we don't have any through the Charter School Institute. So some of this is an attempt to address different needs, but it's complicated, because I asked Senator Johnson specifically about this point, about, well, where would our charters fit into this? Would they receive money here and not ours then? Because we're considering a future bond issue. So, who knows? This will probably just have to be worked out, but it is a little complicated. But that's some of what goes on here, because those that are through the Charter School Institute wouldn't most likely participate in local bonds and mills. So that's been some of the discussion the last couple of years around that. But it's another complication.
I'd like to follow up on the question about charters, and it's a question about, this feels to me, and perhaps I'm wrong, but this reminds me of the backpack issue, when the intention in the last session was to send money directly to principals, bypassing locally elected school boards. And I'm wondering if this is another of those situations where the legislature is allocating funds directly to what specific or charter schools that are chartered by the Charter Institute. And it feels like it's sort of interesting, because about our charters that we are part of our district, but the charters that are not part of our district, but it feels like it's, if any of the money were to go to our charters, are they bypassing the board?
Yes, they would. Yes, I think they would be bypassing the board's authority. Then I think the question is, if that were to happen, then how would you as an elected board deal with our charters if they were already receiving money for capital construction through this fund would they participate then in our bond if we have one in a different way? So I think that's some of what's, makes it a bit more complicated when you have a centralized funding authority, the state, for local schools, charters. So it is a bit complicated.
Well, please keep us posted.
Absolutely.
About the changing nature of these funding bills as they go forward. And, I appreciate you bringing forward that our perspective from Boulder Valley School District and this board's urgency about funding and support for eliminating the negative factor, both as a superintendent's group and as supporting our district, as we've made very clear about what our needs are. So thank you for bringing that forward. And I hope the public is listening, because it's very important that the public participate in these conversations as well. This board can't spend the money if we don't have it, and the people who have it are people in the legislature, and it would be great for our public to speak up and talk about their values. And I think our community does value education. So keep us posted. I'm sure it'll be a long saga.
So I might just add on that point briefly, Lori, is that we did the superintendent's blog this week on some explanation of this work and the negative factor, and we'll follow up next on a description of if money were restored to Boulder Valley School District, how might those resources be used, and some costs associated with those, because sometimes they all just become really big numbers, and how does that, so we're, not that any decision's been made, but just as examples, things that we've talked about that are priorities, literacy, class size, those kinds of things, and then also how they might personally choose to get involved, either our employees or community with our legislative context. So Briggs Gamblin's working on a communication piece. So we're hoping in the next week that will go out to just continue to communicate and help give ways for our community to become actively involved. So we'll follow up with that.
Thank you. I think it's great. Any other questions of Dr. Messenger?
I have a quick one.
Sure.
Can you remind me what the rule of thumb is about what it costs to take class size down by one child throughout the district? Isn't there a rule of thumb?
$4 million.
$4 million?
For our district. If we were to adjust the ratio or the index by 1, it's $4 million.
So if we get 3.5% of this $100 million recurring, it's not even enough to take down class size by 1
That's correct.
right now.
Any other questions? Nope. Okay, the next item on our agenda is public participation, and we have no one signed up for this evening. So we'll move on to board communication. Is there anyone who would like to talk about what they've been doing or what ideas they have? Sam, please.
Just exactly follows what we said. I just support Dr. Messenger's continued engagement at the state level. I know it takes time away from the district, but it's time well spent. So thank you for your leadership on that at the state level.
Let's see. Tom or Jenny? Okay.
So, 4 of us were able to attend CASB's Winter Legislative Conference last week, Lori, Shelley, Tina, and I. And it was a really interesting conference, and I'm sure the other people will have more to say. We spent a lot of time talking about reducing the negative factor. I will say that, and so one of the things I heard while I was there was that I think just sort of speaks to the state of public education in Colorado, was there was a superintendent from a rural school district, Marino, is that right? Who brought his science teachers, small district, so he brought the science teacher they have in that district, who is only teaching through April, and then she's going to go work for the state prison system because I think they were going to double her salary. And so I just think that it says something about the priorities in our state when when qualified professionals find it more profitable to work for prisons than for public schools. And I thought that was really sad. I heard a number of sad stories, but that was one of the sad stories I heard at the conference, and so I thought I'd pass that along. Feel free to use it. The other thing that came up a lot, and that we're going to, it was assessments. I'd heard more concern around the number of state assessments and changes in state assessments than I've heard at that kind of conference for a long time. So there's just a lot of anxiety. There were a lot of anxiety among fellow board members about how that's going to work, how it's going to fit in with teacher assessment. How do we assess student growth when we have a new new assessment coming out, and I think the short answer is nobody knows for sure yet. But they're sure we can do it. So it was a really good conference, and I intend to follow up with some of the things I found out. And again, I appreciate Bruce, and I appreciate our board members who go to town halls where our legislators turn up and who keep on our legislators about that kind of thing. I'd like to do a shout out to Aspen Creek. Their middle school, one of their teams at Rain Bowl did quite well, and won not only the regional competition, but then the state, Colorado-Wyoming competition. And I'm really thrilled about it. This is the first year in a long time that I haven't coached a team, so perhaps, I just wonder if that's a reflection on my coaching abilities.
No cause and effect.
But anyway, it's really great, so congratulations to Aspen Creek. And I'm looking forward, I'm going to be judging History Day at Broomfield Heights Middle School on Thursday. I'm really looking forward to that. It's another great addition to our curriculum, one that I think benefits all kids, so I'm really excited to see what those 8th graders have been up to over there. That's it.
Good, thanks. Anyone else? Great. Well, I enjoy going to the CASB conference as well. It's always interesting and fun, and part of the conversation we just had about finances and part of the conversation about testing is, I think, what's in the foremost of a lot of educators' minds. And so we just need to keep our eye on it and see where we can participate and influence the discussion. Anything else on that? Okay, our next item of business is action items, the consent grouping, which consists today of personnel items, approval of minutes, February 11th special meeting, approval of minutes, February 11th regular meeting, approval of minutes, February 18th special meeting, acceptance of donation of food services, and a reduction in force timeline. Do I have a motion to approve? Jenny? Sam? Jenny first and Sam seconded. Thank you. Is there any discussion? Well then, we'll call the roll.
Albright.
Yes.
Belleville.
Yes.
Benford. Fuqua.
Yes.
Marquis. Yes. Myers.
Yes.
Reed.
Yes.
Motion passes.
Thank you. The next item on our agenda is the electric participation in school board meetings policy. And just as a reminder, we discussed this at the last meeting and suggested to staff that there were some things that we would prefer to change in our policy, and we have before us a new policy. And
need a
Bruce, do you
motion?
want to speak to? Oh,
We'll need a
sorry.
motion.
Sorry, I
We'll
always
need a
forget the
motion.
process. We need a motion to approve. Shelley, and second? Tina? Thank you, thank you. So, any discussion?
Lori?
Yes,
I have a
please.
question.
Tom, sure.
So one of the things, I missed the discussion last time around. One of the things in here that I saw was the exclusion of the executive session from, the electronic participation. So I went back and I read through the statute, and I don't see that specifically called out. I was wondering what the rationale was for that.
You want to address that, Melissa? Alyssa Barber will make her way to the podium and address your question, Tom.
Sure.
Good question, thank you.
So we did have some discussion in cabinet about that. And the concern that we felt was the issue of the confidentiality if you have somebody off-site and really not being able to monitor that environment as a group.
Okay, but that's no different than the confidentiality agreement that we signed, that we're not going to talk about that. So I don't see why that doesn't apply if we're in a remote location. We're still under that agreement that we would have to maintain, a certain amount of security of where we were in that conversation so that we don't violate it ourselves. So I guess I don't see any difference between that and what we do already.
And you can certainly take that approach, and we really had that discussion, and, there's two sides, and kind of the balance fell on excluding that part of it from the participation.
Good.
I think we would agree, Tom, to your point. We don't, and correct me if I misstate this, but we don't think the law disallows it.
Right.
So it really is a policy-level decision. And to Melissa's point, I think it was when the board goes into executive session, the door is closed, all present, what goes on stays in the room. So I think it's just, the confidence level of the board, and it wasn't our confidence in this board, but we also had discussion about, this is a policy that, applies to all boards going forward. So, it's just it's a matter of whether, as a board, you're comfortable opening that up, not having the person in the setting, in the presence, and not knowing what setting they're in. But that was the discussion, Tom. So I think, and again, it's a policy, so either way you would decide, it could always be revised. But that's really the conversation we had around it, is really trying to control the environment in an executive session where confidential matters would be discussed, so.
I know there have been executive sessions in the past where people have had difficulty getting there. We've had
Correct.
difficulty in scheduling those. Particularly, I remember one where Elaine was down in Denver, and in a matter of driving up here, to participate made that an issue. So certainly, with the capability of doing this now, it certainly allows us all to be present if there are extenuating circumstances. So I think that's worth considering as a pro. And I think we're bound by our confidentiality agreement regardless of whether we're sitting in the room or not. So I really don't think that is a concern.
I know some of this language is suggested by CASB, is that right? Is that one of the things that was suggested, that executive sessions be closed to electronic participation?
That is not in the CASB model.
Okay.
That came out of our discussion.
So the CASB model would allow it to
Right, it did not make that distinction.
Okay, thanks.
So I guess I would offer up an amendment that we strike that portion of this policy that disallows electronic participation in executive session.
Okay. Let's just talk about procedure for just a moment. We can, because we can either wordsmith this now, or we can say, because what we did last time was it came before us and we said, no, we had some concerns about some of the content. Would you please go back and reflect some of the things that we said, which freed up the opportunity for more electronic
Sure.
involvement. And so we can either vote on this now, or we can say, let's go back and take another crack at it and bring it back in a final form.
Yeah,
So
and I- yeah.
either way is okay with me.
Okay, well, that's great, because I have several other issues.
Oh, yeah,
And
let's
instead of
not-
offering amendment after amendment, I'd like to talk about all of them, then we can decide if we want to send it, work on it some more.
Let's do that.
Okay.
Let's do that. So
Okay,
pull back that amendment and we'll
All right, I'll
discuss
pull
the
that back.
issues that are on that you're concerned about and that others might be, and
that's fine.
as we continue to work. What we need to do is get this right.
Yes,
And
I agree.
not rush it. There's no reason to rush.
Okay.
Okay.
Since
so
I'm talking,
another
should
thing,
I?
Please.
Should I keep going?
Please keep going.
Okay. All right. So with the second paragraph, talking about the extenuating circumstances, it's a job, military service, or a personal obligation that requires a member to be outside of the district. So a couple of concerns I have there is that, if a board member is ill, say has the flu, they feel good enough to participate, but they don't want to come and give me the flu. I would like to be able to have them do that,
To stay home.
stay home.
Yeah, fair enough.
So, I would say we would add something that would refer to some personal circumstances such as that. And we could either say
And I-
sickness or illness or.
And I can add a little more information. Since we met last time, I did I got to about 6 districts that have adopted this policy. Basically the CASB model, but illness had been added.
Yeah, so
several
something
of
like
them.
that,
I think
and
it
then
was,
you would need to strike the outside of the
Adams
district,
12,
because we'd be in the
Littleton,
district, but maybe at home
Thompson.
with hopefully not a broken leg, but that could be a possibility.
Personal obligation or
So-
illness.
Jenny, go ahead.
Yeah,
I agree with you, Tom, but I've sort of toyed with the idea of just saying that if there are extenuating circumstances, whatever they, I mean, just referring to extenuating circumstances
trying
and
to
not
name them
trying to
all.
define them, because further down in the policy, it says you can do it twice a year. And so I think we limit, I think that we take care of the potential for abuse of this policy by just saying you only do it twice a year. So people who don't want to come to board meetings can twice, I mean, for whatever reason. And
Yeah.
I think we can leave it to the board member's judgment what an extenuating circumstance is, because
So we talked about this last time, that there is an issue with the law around if we're gonna have a policy, we're supposed to define extenuating circumstances. So we need a definition in there, and we can make it, as broad as you like.
okay.
But we need to
Let's
say
make it
something.
broad, You know what's going to happen is we'll forget and leave out something. But like you say, it's a living document, we can make changes if necessary.
So I have a suggestion about this. So if we talk about personal obligation or circumstances, that would be a more inclusive statement. I mean, if we just were to add those two words right after personal obligation or circumstances. And then the other thing I was thinking to do to modify the rest of that sentence is to say requires the member to be, and then I would just say absent from the meeting.
Right,
Because, I mean,
Yeah.
some people are gonna be sick in their
district.
bed
Yeah.
in their district. I mean, people are infected with something.
Yeah.
They might be in the district, but
Right.
not at the meeting,
Right.
so,
I agree.
okay.
But the one other thing you said is about the two meetings. Having personally been involved, one of the first ones to do this, I know that it was probably at least 3 meetings last year that I had to call in. And that doesn't mean that's necessarily the norm, but that was due to the nature of my job being pulled away. So 2 seems a little light to me. I would like to maybe increase that 3 or 4, something like that. Not a huge amount, but out of, what do we have, 22 board meetings a year, something like that, roughly, 2022, to have 3 or 4 that we miss or have to participate electronically. I'd rather have the person participating than not, is the point.
Me too.
Yeah. So thanks, that's all I had.
Shelley?
I think that makes sense. I mean, you could be sick one time, and then that only leaves one business trip, and, I mean, many other things could happen in the course of a year, so. Do we have to have a number there, or can we say reasonable number of times, or should we just increase the number?
So just as you look at that paragraph, there, whatever number we use, then there is the authority of the board to go beyond that. So I think it's a way to kind of put some parameters around it of what you find would be acceptable, given what you know now. And then if a person's circumstance was that that they, a number of things happen in a given year, the board certainly has authority to, well, it's your policy, obviously, you can do what you'd like, but, I mean, you have that flexibility even within this policy to waive that, so. So maybe adjust the number if that's the pleasure of the board, and then still have a number, knowing that you can flex it if you choose to, so.
And I just looked at that statute, and there's not a required maximum. So the board can decide the maximum number.
I have one question here, and it was about whether this is about regular or special meetings. And in the very first sentence, it refers to in regular special meetings. And so today, we're having 2 meetings. We're having a regular meeting, and then we're having a special meeting. And so in one day, you could wipe out 2 of them. And if we had a meeting with another group, a city council, someplace later this week, that would be 3.
Yeah.
And so you'd already bump up against it. So it's a tricky thing. I mean, our expectation, I think, is that people attend meetings and not abuse it. What?
And we have been.
Well, we have been, right, and here we are trying to set for a future board, for our own behavior, but also for a future board. But because it's regular and special, we're tying ourselves up pretty tight here. To be making exceptions, and my sense is better to have more trust and a little more flexibility. So for me, I would prefer, I don't know, I'm not even sure about the question about having a number or having an open-ended. I mean, I don't know what anyone else thinks about that. Sam?
I'd be willing to consider a larger number. I would like to have a number in there, though. Just thinking about future boards and people trying to avoid tough public meetings or some other things that might come up if we leave it too open-ended.
So do you have a suggestion for a,
I would be comfortable with 4, as
4?
Tom suggested. Yeah.
okay? Any comments to that?
I guess
Any
I'm
objection?
I'm the one who grows weary of, when you go from 2, when you go to 10% and you bump it to 20%, I think the intent of this policy isn't special and regular meetings. It's hard to participate in a work session we have with another city council. So, I mean, we're not going to be holding those. I think it's really about the regular meetings, regular days, those kinds of participations. But, if we bump it up to 20%, I'm kind of conflicted because, I'd like to have people participate. But on the other hand, I think it is important to be physically present with everyone, to be able to look people in the eye. So I guess maybe we could land on 3. And, I think the policy as written allows exceptions. And, it's really about, if someone ends up abusing it, there's a mechanism in here to cut that off. And I think that's probably my greater interest, is to make sure that this isn't going to be abused by a member of the board who isn't here right now, not elected yet. So that's my 2 cents.
You okay with 3?
I could live with 3. I agree with Jim's point, but 3 I could live with.
I mean, we certainly prefer attendance. I mean, there's no question about it, so. Before we get off of this number question,
But it's related to
go
that.
ahead, please.
Let's say someone has missed 2 board meetings, and then the next clause here is that unless otherwise approved by the board, additional requests to attend and participate will be denied. What is the process for approving someone who is sick that day? How do we call a meeting to approve whether they can participate that evening in a board meeting?
We could do it at the beginning of the meeting.
We could do it at the beginning of the meeting.
We'd have to set up everything prior to that
Yeah.
approval to.
I mean, the expectation is that we would do that, I think.
I would think
But
so.
it's a good procedural question, I agree.
I guess to me, it seems kind of strange to approve so that a board member can participate, I would say, if there's got to be a maximum, fine. There's other clauses that have to do with the maximum number you miss before you can basically be taken off the board, right? So it may fall into that category, but to approve someone to participate, that just feels wrong to me. Let them participate, maybe then that the extra ones come off of the 3-day consecutive, I don't know. But it just seems awkward to me to approve, like if you called in and said, I want to participate, oh, we got to approve you participating. Just feels wrong.
Is there another mechanism besides having the board approve? Could we have the executive committee approve? No?
And this is my reading of the statute, and the legal department may have a different opinion, but I think without this policy, we can't participate electronically. So as without this policy right now, we should be forced to have a vote to allow electronic participation in a meeting. And is that fair?
I would say there's differing opinions on that.
Okay.
The fact that a state law says we can do it this way, doesn't say we can't do it. But there are different opinions on that among lawyers, so.
Okay.
Well, the vote would only come up if you were on your 4th time, if you were participating the 4th time, and so the rest of the time it would be automatic.
It seems like, I mean, the only reason you're writing this policy is to prevent abuse. So if we just take ourselves out of this and think, what could we say that would prevent something, really abusive happening to the process, then we can probably pick a number that feels right and take out the approval part. And if you miss 5 meetings or 4 meetings, what happens to you if you just denied participation, right, in the meeting?
Well, then you run into missing meetings and when you end up having the seat vacant.
Well, that's if they're consecutive, right? If they're consecutive meetings, it says,
So,
Yeah.
if you fail to attend 3 consecutive board meetings,
So it's sort of like you'd have 6 then, 3 that you could participate in electronically, and 3 that you could miss. So, I mean, it's essentially, if we went with 3, then it would be the 4th and 5th and 6th, which seems like a very long time to be off the board. To be not participating. That person's not participating at that point. So,
So I,
so do we have a recommendation? Do you want to send it back a little bit confused still, or?
I have a question, I have a further question on a different topic. I'm sort of comfortable with you can participate 3 meetings, and if you miss 3 consecutive meetings, I don't know it's ever happened, so I think that's sort of a worst-case scenario. But what I do have a question about is whether we need some kind of limit on the number of people you have to have in the boardroom for a quorum. Do we have that? So that if we had, nobody here and everybody participating remotely, would that be a board
No, we
meeting?
have to have a quorum according to
So you
this
have to have a quorum
policy
here? I wasn't sure
present.
about that, so,
Yes,
so how
it
many
is.
people, so 4?
4.
Yeah. Okay, that was just my question.
Okay.
So only 3 people at a time could participate electronically.
I'm for the least restraints on the board. So
Okay.
as many meetings as we can agree to is fine with me on the maximum side.
Okay.
I could go with 10 or 6 because I just don't really think that people who volunteer to do this job intend to not be here. And if they aren't here, I think it's probably for a good reason, and I think we should build that trust into the document, but that's my opinion.
Okay. Tina?
If we set a high limit like 10 or 8, we might want to indicate somewhere, though, that the expectation is to be here physically, that this isn't a sort of half remote, half present type of obligation. I think that would just, especially because we are so used to now participating in things remotely, this isn't one of them. That's not the norm for this group.
Right. So maybe a clause then, you're suggesting to say what the norm is that attendance is expected, and then this is an opportunity to allow in additional times. Okay. So do we have any consensus about 3 or 4 days of missing, or 8 or 10, or? Sam?
I'm comfortable with 3 or 4.
Okay.
I like 3 with further, with the board's option to approve more if it's needed.
Okay.
I'm good with 3 or 4 with the option to change this in a year and also with the clauses that are
Oh,
there.
that's a good idea. Okay. Thanks. Shelley, you just said you were open for,
Well, I like Tina's suggestion of board members are expected to physically attend the meetings, but if for any extenuating circumstance they can't, they can participate electronically. I would be fine with leaving it that open.
okay. Jim?
3 sounds good to me.
Okay. I wasn't really counting. Do we have 3, 4, or 4?
I heard a lot of 3 4s and
I heard a lot of 3,
1
4s.
3 and 1 4 from me. So
All
it's
right.
kind of like in
And
the
one
middle here.
unlimited, so that brings the average up.
So,
So,
are you numeracy here? Yeah, I'm more inclined to be more trusting and to go with 4 as well. So, not that we're taking a vote here, but would you take a look at that and write it in that way with a little bit more flexibility?
Yeah, I will need a motion to pull it from this agenda.
Could I get a little more clarity? I didn't know if you all finished discussing the issue of executive session,
In terms of what?
the executive session piece. I know that Tom raised that
Thank
issue,
you.
but I didn't know if there was
Okay.
any consensus.
So, Tom, your point is that we already have an agreement that we've signed about confidentiality, and so we're expecting everyone in that executive session. I mean, shoot, I could have my phone here and be, under the
Yeah.
table in an executive session
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
checking out somebody that, if I'm sitting at the end of the table. I mean, there are ways to violate confidentiality illegally, of course. I mean, none of us would do it, but, so your point is that you'd like to have executive session. And Melissa, your point was that it's permitted, or it's not prevented. It's not prohibited.
Correct.
Okay. So any comments about executive session? Tina?
I would like to see that language struck also.
So you'd like the flexibility of having conversation in executive session by remote?
Yes.
Okay? Okay? Any comments?
I'm going to be in the minority, but I prefer to stay that way.
Okay. All right. Anyone?
Yeah, I can live with striking it, particularly since it's not recommended by our statewide group, CASB. Wasn't part of their recommendations. I can live with
Okay.
removing it from our policy.
Do you have anything to offer on that?
No.
On executive, well, I think the people who've spoken have talked about having more flexibility with executive session.
Okay, thank you.
So, okay. Anything else on this? We have it? Bruce, any comments or any?
We'll do a rewrite. So Sandy, do we need a motion
I
to
think I need a
remove it
motion
from the
to
agenda?
remove
Okay.
it from the agenda.
We need a motion to table this.
Postpone.
Postpone or table? I trust Robert's Rules of Order over here. Jim, is it postpone?
Postpone.
Okay. Jim's made a motion to postpone. Is there a second?
A second.
Tom? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. So if
We'll bring it back
you
on
bring
March
it back
11th.
at the next discussion. Thank you very much. Phil's, again, as I said, we need to get this right. Okay, our next item is agenda setting. Is there anything anybody would like to have be on agenda setting that we haven't discussed? I have something that I would like to ask. I'm hearing talk about a lawsuit on behalf of Amendment 23, and I'd like to consider the idea, in agenda setting, I'd like to talk about the idea of asking someone to come speak about that so that the board can understand what some of the issues are that are being discussed at the state level. So we could put that on our list. Anyone else with agenda setting? Okay, so before we adjourn, I just think it's important. Bruce talked earlier about what we'll be talking about in our special session, and it's about testing. And just so the public has an idea, it's important for us to discuss this in a different environment. But we'll be talking about what actually is happening in testing, a little bit about the context, a little bit about what it means for our students and our parents. It'll be a lot of discussion, and then I would anticipate that perhaps a resolution or a statement out of those discussions could come back to the board, and it could be in a more informational item that we could talk about our ideas about testing. So let's have a motion to adjourn, and then we'll meet here in a special session in just a couple minutes. So do I have a motion? Jenny? Second? Tom? Or, excuse me, Sam. Okay. Meeting adjourned.